Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Severance. I'm from the University of Michigan, and I'm going to talk to you about my sort of 20 years of experience with teaching online and MOOCs. Click, of course. Yep, as simple as that. No, not as simple as that. Oh no, we're not clicking, and it's on. Help. Okay, did I do that? No. Okay, I'll just have to, how about if I make a real obvious clicking motion, and then you know that that means that I've clicked. Okay, so the first thing to say about MOOCs is they're not a particularly new phenomenon. There's many people who have different examples of the beginning. My favorite beginning of this movement is in 1957 when New York University had this thing called Sunrise Semester, where what they did is took airtime on the local CBS station and they just had professors talk during that time. This became very popular. They had at times 120,000 people. And so this is something that's been going a long time. Click. Okay. So fast forward to 1996, that's a picture of me graduating with my PhD. I was a proud, happy computer scientist that was an expert in high-performance computing. I wrote a textbook in high-performance computing, and I thought that was going to be my life's work. But I also, at that same point in time, click, the internet happened. And I didn't particularly invent the internet. I didn't particularly build the TCP/IP protocols. I've had a long history of media as a hobby. And so one of the things that I did was I was lucky enough to be asked to do a television program about the internet in 1996. And so there was a local cable program, local cable television, that wanted to promote the use of cable modems, which were very rare in 1996. And so we did a talk show about the internet and why it was so cool that you would use a cable modem. And so if you look on this set, there was always a, let's see if I can make the laser pointer work. There was always a cable modem on this set, and we would always talk about how fast our particular connection was. And what this gave us, my co-host and myself, an excuse to do is to walk around with cameras and record video interviews with the people who were inventing at the time the internet. The person in the upper left-hand corner is Tim Berners-Lee. We interviewed him on one of our shows, and he talked about all the wonderful future and how the internet might transform society and other things. Another one that we saw was a founder of Real Audio. I don't know how many people are old enough to have seen streaming audio in the 1990s over a 14.4 modem. But one of the things that was postulated in that very interview was that someday people all over the world listening to audio over 14.4 modems would be able to get education anywhere and anytime. And I thought to myself, maybe high-performance computing is not the right thing to do. Click. Click. Next slide, please. Okay. So I just want to, for those of you who were born more recently, I want to remember what the internet looked like, what Wikipedia looked like, what HyperCard looked like. In 1996, technology wasn't nearly as exciting as what we have today. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I invented in 1996 was I streamed lectures over 14.4 modems using audio. And so we didn't have modems fast enough to do video, so I had this very disturbing picture of myself that was ever present in the upper left-hand corner. And slides would flip. These were GIF images because, again, in a 14.4 modem, there wasn't much that you could send across a 14.4 modem. Next slide, please. And so this evolved, and we created a studio eventually. When we got 28.8 modems, we could send little bits of video. We could jump around in the video. We built a little learning management system that lived around this thing. Next slide, please. And so it got so far that in 1988, I wrote a grant that effectively came up with the notion of Facebook, came up with the notion of presence. It built a whole learning management system. If you look, these are pretty much what we think of as a MOOC today. You've got overview, you've got lectures, discussion, and grade books and assignments. Next slide, please. I didn't get that particular, that was, next slide, please. Okay, and so I never got that particular grant, so it was very frustrating to me. I went on to build another technology based on Apple's QuickTime in early 2000 that I called Clipboard 2000, which is pretty much what Camtasia is today. It was almost 10 years later that we could do Camtasia. It would record video. You could scribble on the slides. You could annotate the slides. You could point at things. You could flip. You could. It had a document camera built in. I built all this technology. I tried to give it to Apple. I said, you should build this into your operating system in 2000. And of course, they didn't appreciate it nor recognize it then as well. So next slide, please. Another thing that happened in the early 2000s is OpenCourseWare. And one of the things that a friend of mine, Joseph Harden, who was part of the building of Mosaic, and I were going to go work at MIT to work on OpenCourseWare. But one of the things that we wanted to build was we wanted to build really cool software that would make OpenCourseWare very, very easy to build and very easy to exchange. And that didn't work out, and so we ended up with, next slide, please. We ended up working on an open source learning management system called Sakai because our view of the world was that if we could get everyone to use a really cool learning management system and we built really cool export-import capability into that learning management system, then open educational resources would be a very natural activity as a result of that. And so we really built this Sakai as a way to get people to exchange things and teachers to exchange things, and so that when teachers could exchange materials, that would make teaching better. Next slide, please. And so interestingly, we used this Sakai system that I was a big part of the building of and the writing of it as our teaching environment at the University of Michigan. And here I was a core developer on this project, and I asked our production people at the University of Michigan to change a feature because I wanted to use it in my class, a feature that I'd written about 6 months earlier. And they told me that because it was August, we couldn't change anything in the system. And I realized at that moment that while I had written much of the source code of the learning management system that was running in production at my university, that I had created a prison. I, as a teacher, was stuck inside of this prison, this learning management system. And even though I could write the code, and I was a builder of that code, I had built a prison of my own making. And so I got angry at that point because first I'm a teacher, right? I wanted to free teachers by building an open source learning management system, but in effect all I did is came up with a different way of enslaving teachers. Next slide, please. And so I vowed kind of at that moment that instead of building the world's greatest learning management system, which I keep working on the world's greatest learning management system, but I decided at that point that my goal was actually to get teachers to escape from learning management systems, to create a way for teachers to no longer be constrained by their learning management systems. Next slide, please. So then I put my energy into a thing called IMS Learning Tools Interoperability. This is a specification that's used worldwide. And it is a way to plug a tool, whatever learning tool that you might want to build, into a learning management system. And so we did this, and I built this standard along with many other people. Next slide, please. And so this is the standard number of products around the world that comply with this standard from 2005 to 2014. And 2007, 2008 is when I got angry and said, I'm going to build this thing and then get people to do it. And one of the things that I did, sort of to challenge everybody in the marketplace, is I put a tattoo on my shoulder. It's real, it's right here. It's a tattoo, and I started with the Sakai tattoo, and then I told all of the learning management system vendors that the moment that they would give us this learning tools interoperability specification, that I would put their logo. So I've got Blackboard, Desire to Learn, Genzabar, Canvas, Moodle, Angel, Learning Objects, OLAT, and Coursera. And so I don't now there's 120 of these now, so I don't keep doing this, but this was for the first few that I promised that I would put a tattoo on this particular shoulder. And I did it one at a time as each vendor would comply with this standard. And so that's an exciting part. Next slide, please. And so there's lots and lots of companies, lots and lots of products. Many of you probably are using learning tools interoperability with your learning management systems, whether you know it or not. It means that now you can increase the capability of the teaching and learning environment that you're using just with a click. A URL key and a secret is put in the right place in your system, and your system now has another tool. So it's very, very exciting. Next slide, please. So that's kind of like a technical and learning preparation. In 2012, I was very lucky to be at one of the first 4 universities to launch the MOOC revolution through the Coursera. edX also came out, but the University of Michigan was one of the first 4. And I luckily was able to get to be one of the first classes. Next slide, please. And so I decided to teach as my very first class on Coursera, my very first MOOC, a class that no one else could teach. I decided that I would teach a class on internet history that featured video interviews of all the people that nearly over a decade earlier I had interviewed, that I was the only person who had all these old dusty tapes that I had no use for. So I made this class about that really was my television show that had a few lectures plus a television show. Okay, next slide, please. And so that led to Internet History, Technology, and Security. And this was an interesting class because as a trained computer scientist, one of my great concerns and angst is that not too many people like to program, and that frustrates me. I want everyone to learn how to program. I think programming is wonderful. I find it a very creative activity. I don't find it work at all. It brings me great joy. So one of the secret goals of this course was to trick people into learning about technology. The idea was I would catch them with the word history. And they're like, history? I can do history. And then we would sneak from history to technology and then security, and by the end they're doing things like public-private key encryption and looking at the numerical aspects of digital security. And it worked pretty well. It was like a 15-week class, and the first 5 weeks were security, the next were technology. And so, next slide, please. And so I did things like in the middle, I would actually teach them about IP addresses. And these were a bunch of historians. And the trick was I was trying to get them, it's like the frog where I was warming the water up. I was teaching them technology, sneaking it in slowly but surely. And it worked. It was a lot of fun. And I really loved teaching that class. And so my first MOOC, I would teach 10 weeks each time. We got a new one. Then I get to be more fluid. Backwards, forwards. Oh, I feel the power now. It's awesome. And I would scribble on the slides, sort of like what I'm doing here. I'm scribbling on the slides, and I recorded. I used Camtasia, which is the software that I tried to invent a decade earlier, but that's just using commercial stuff. The whole thing, my whole strategy was I tried to make it so that it was very intimate, very personal. The last thing you want to do is record something like this and pretend that's distance education. I wanted to be really close. I wanted to imagine that I was on a big screen TV in someone's living room, and I wanted to talk right to them through that television. Having a background in TV, I was very comfortable with the camera, and I could talk through the camera. It was very natural for me. And that was a roaring success, as was pretty much every course that came out in Coursera. Thousands of people all over the world. It was very, very exciting and very, very heady days. Things that came out of that just emerged, and it was fun to be part of the very first set of MOOCs, were things like the community teaching assistants, now we call them mentors, the notion that there were people who have so much to give as teachers, but they live somewhere that they can't teach, or they're at a point in their career where they can't teach. And so there are so many people that sort of just come to this MOOC space and want to make the space better for others. Literally, there's no way that I could do the kind of one-to-one interaction that people need to do. And so this is just a set of some of the people who were my mentors that really helped me build that course in the beginning. Another thing that I did, and I don't know why more people don't do this, is I had what I call face-to-face office hours. And what you build in a MOOC after a while is a mailing list, and I still have a mailing list that now is over 1 million students. And what I do is, when I'm in Amsterdam, I say, I'm going to be at this Starbucks at 10:15 on Friday morning, and I'll be there for an hour. And I send that to 1 million of my closest friends. Now, it is a little bit weird, because it's like going on a blind date with 1 million people, because you really go to the Starbucks, you sit there, and you have no idea who's going to show up. But I've done this 40 times all over the world, and somewhere between 3 and 25 people show up. We've only gotten in trouble once. We sort of overloaded the lobby of a hotel once. I've learned that the best thing to do is to do them in a bar, because bars, as long as you're picking up the tab, the bar doesn't matter if a whole bunch of loud people show up and start talking animatedly about teaching and learning. Here's one of the graphs that you see over and over in the early days of MOOCs, and that is the basic drop-off by week, the old drop-off by week. So this would just be one of my classes, starts at around 30,000 and then ends up at about 10,000 at the end. So we kind of got upset about that. Everyone says, well, I've not taught 10,000 people in my career, so this is still a pretty good number, which I still believe is true. But then the other graph that we didn't show quite so often was the graph of if you're teaching a course every 3 times a year, there's a period when you're not teaching the course. And so the registration, this is one of the registrations of my course that would get up to like 80,000 people. And then right at this moment, we would send a note that said, hey, start the course. And you see that a whole bunch of people didn't start the course. So we'd lose them right away, and then we'd lose even more. And so often you'd see these numbers here compared to those numbers there, and you say, well, you started with 80,000 and you end up with less than 10,000. But really, this is a problem of people wanted to take the course. They clearly wanted to take the course, and we weren't ready to give the course. We weren't ready to give the course. Oh, and now we give the course. And so that was a problem of scale because it seemed like it was too much effort to give the course continuously. Now, one of the things that is the key to my course that makes my course kind of special, my Python course, by some measure, is the number 3 most popular MOOC in the world. And one of the things that I do that's different than everybody else is I have this really cool autograder that you check your code and it sends the grades automatically, and it uses a whole bunch of technology that I've built and this learning tools interoperability, because as you saw on my tattoo, Coursera has learning tools interoperability as well. And so this course is not just me giving lectures and quizzes, but I also have a very fun autograder that lets you learn Python in the browser. We have people who take this course that do Python sitting on their iPad, and they never have anything other than the iPad. They can completely take the first 10 weeks of all my courses without even installing any software, because we give them an in-browser environment that completely simulates what they need. The other thing that's important to me is open and free. I have a free textbook, Python for Informatics. I got it for free because 10 years earlier, 2 other friends of mine, Jeff Elkner and Alan Downey, wrote a free textbook and gave that away. And so I adapted that textbook, and I'm giving my textbook away as well. So I think that open and free are an important part of any MOOC kind of strategy if you're going to get up to scale. It's really a bad idea to have a MOOC and then tell people to buy an $80 textbook because they think they're kind of being cheated at that point. And I agree with them. Now, the interesting thing is with modern-day publishing, like CreateSpace, you can also sell your free book very easily. So I'm actually making money off of a free book. The other thing that's interesting about blending MOOCs and open educational resources is that by you showing that you're interested in giving, you engender in your own students the urge to give you back. Because you're not being completely selfish about what it is that you're doing. They want to honor that gift and come back. And so this is the original book that I wrote, Python for Informatics, which I took from someone else. But here is a Spanish, a Korean, and a Chinese and a Korean, all translated for free. And these are up on CreateSpace because they gave me back the translations and let me put them up on CreateSpace. And then a couple of months ago, when I wanted to go from Python 2 to Python 3, I sent an email out. I put the book up on GitHub, and I sent an email out, and I said, does anybody want to help me convert this to Python 3? And literally, I haven't touched the conversion yet, and the book is about 80% converted already to Python 3 by people who are just giving me back the conversion. So this isn't a notion of you give the open, and then you receive the benefits. And so I'm becoming my own little publisher. These are all of my books. And they're selling. The one that sells the most is the Python for Informatics, but this Python for Everybody is my next Python 3 book, but it's just up as a draft. But Amazon CreateSpace, if you're not familiar with it, is a wonderful way to sell books. The cost of that textbook is $9.99 plus shipping on Amazon, and on the wholesale price is $3. And I actually make $2.22 on every single copy that's sold for $9.99, which is completely this opposite of how a publisher like Pearson sells a book for $170, and the person who wrote the book still only gets $2 a book. My book, I get $2 a book, but the students only pay $9 a book, and every single online electronic copy is 100% free. Another thing is that I'm trying to do is create sort of the notion of edutainment, that connecting entertainment and education. And so this is a little video, I got the YouTube down here, where I attempted to make a fun little video about myself. I actually asked the University of Michigan to send a camera crew with me. I was going to Paris and Milan to speak at a conference, and I met some students in Milan. So I made this little video, and it's sort of me being Anthony Bourdain or one of these sort of traveling people trying to say that teaching is as important as cooking food. And so a traveling teacher is as interesting as a traveling chef. But I haven't quite got there yet. So haven't got my entourage and my camera people yet. So in 2015, another major revolution happened. And that was something that both edX and Coursera were experimenting with that sort of went pushed really hard, and that's the notion of specializations. Prior to that, the typical course that I would do is a 10-week course, which is about a third of a semester of material spread across 10 weeks. But with some studying, Coursera came up with a notion that said courses should be 5 weeks long, and we should connect them together. And so I took my original 10-week course, split it into 2 5-week courses, added another 5-week course, and ended up with a capstone at the end. So there's a total of 5 5-week courses that then actually approximates almost exactly what I teach in a single semester on campus. This has been overwhelmingly successful. Overwhelmingly successful. This is a screenshot I took last night. This is for the last 6 months, basically. 400,000 people have visited. 250,000 people have engaged actively. 31,000 have, 250,000 have enrolled. 31,000 have completed. 176,000 active learners. That's a lot of people. A couple ways to visualize that. This is the second largest stadium in the world. It's the University of Michigan football stadium. It holds 110,000 people. I teach that many people every 3 months without fail. And once a year, I teach effectively the entire population of Tallinn, the city that we're sitting in. Once a year, I teach that many people. So the interesting thing about this is the 5-week format. 1 course, 1 course, 1 course, 1 course, 1 course. But we start them every 2.5 weeks. So there's a lot of ways to go through it. One is you just kind of go through it, and then you start to the next one, and then you start to the next one, start to the next one, but they're all self-paced. So some people go really fast, and they finish the whole thing in like less than 6 weeks. The capstone only runs once in a great while. Some people take the first 2 weeks and then drop out, and they go back. Take the first 2 weeks, drop out, go back. And then they might say, well, I wonder what the second one is. Oh, wait, that's hard. I better go back and take the first 2 weeks. And so you find amazing personalized journeys through this material simply enabled by the fact that I give them flexibility. Every 2 weeks, a new cohort of all 4 classes starts. Now, this has required really good automation. This has required really good grading software. It's required really good teaching assistants. It's required everything to work really well. But once it works, it is amazing how powerful of a tool this is to engage learners. Okay, so that's kind of the present. Oh, let me go back to this slide right here. This represents, all these courses right here actually represent about $1.5 million worth of revenue to Coursera, Michigan, my school, and me. $1.5 million split up among those people for the last 6 months. So that's $3 million a year for one set of classes. Okay, so if you and your university and Coursera can make $3 million a year, that means we better make a lot more of these MOOCs, right? Because everyone's going to make $3 million a year. I'm not sure that's the right conclusion to reach in this situation. I'm extremely lucky, even though there are 5 other Python classes in Coursera, and I was not the first Python class. The one thing that I am is I was the most personable Python class, and that's probably the reason that my class is most successful. And so there's going to be this move to make lots and lots of MOOCs. And I use the background of money very much on purpose. I fear that at this point, they're the kinds of people who are expert at business, expert at automation, expert at scale, are going to show up. The problem is we've gone through a whole series of automation of education phases that are not very fun, right? This is B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner had the notion of a learning machine. B.F. Skinner also was the one that would teach a pigeon to peck at a little red dot until its beak would fall off, right? And the idea was if we just make the right machine with the right set of stimulus and responses and Pavlovian positive negative reinforcement with a little bit of electric shock or whatever you need, eventually you could create as many intelligent people that you want with the right kind of machine-human connection. That is, we don't need teachers anymore. We just get their teachers, extract their knowledge, squeeze their heads until we figure out what they have, stick it in this thing, and then just shock these kids until they learn. What a great way to teach, right? But that's what experts think. Here's another early thing. This is Plato. I actually remember we had CDC computers where I was at the time at Michigan State University. And the idea, again, is that there is this sort of relationship between the software in the computer and this person, and somehow that will be enough to teach them. Here's another one of these drill and kill kinds of situations. This is the SCORM, right? A lot of people thought that SCORM was the right answer. And so SCORM is scalable, content, reusable, object, something or other. It was all the rage a while back. So you can know that you're in SCORM if the main thing you see is a next and back button. You just say next, 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 and there's stuff to read, and then they got a formative assessment at the end, and then you drag some stuff up. And that, if you do that enough, if you can somehow force people to sit and watch this for 10 years, you need no teachers, right? I mean, many of you probably have had this kind of training. At my institution, we use this training for ethics, right? So you take ethics training, use this kind of software, you say next, 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 take a quiz, next, 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 take a quiz. Turns out that the quizzes are so lousy and the training is so lousy, the only way to pass the ethics training at my university is to take screenshots of everything as you go through it and then cheat on the quiz when you get to it. And so this is another terrible notion of scaling education. And so that's one of the things that I am very fearful, is that things that are successful, we're all of a sudden going to say, I'm a business expert, I know how to scale this, let me show you how to do this. This is another thing that our next speaker is going to talk about. I'll just say right now, I'm not a provost, I'm not an IT specialist, I'm not a learning designer, I'm a teacher. I'm kind of fanatical about being a teacher. Other people will have different opinions about what the most important thing is, but it shouldn't surprise you that I think the most important thing is the teacher and the student. So a lot of things people say, oh, big data, right? I love this. I stole this off a website, right? Here we have a beautiful little child covered in a soft, friendly data layer, and then, the child is gaining all this knowledge from the computer, and data is taking care of everything. And this is sort of the basic model of how we make education better, right? A lot of people have built a lot of companies based on this, made a lot of money, get a lot of venture capital. They say, okay, we got people, right? They're a kind of a flawed, fluffy, wet, weird thing. If we have enough data about these people, we can gather that and we write some AI, and then we can sort of, I don't know exactly what happens here, but something's happening to change the human's direction. By the time the AI has read all the data, the humans are changed, and that's great, isn't it? Now, it turns out I looked for a slide like this, and I couldn't find it. So I cheated, and I stole a slide. This is the slide I stole. It turns out that this whole big data thing works great for marketing. It really does. Because what you're doing is you're A/B testing humans, and you poke them one way, you poke them a different way. These group spends more money on your website. You go like, well, that must be a good idea. On to the next experiment. Poke them this way, poke them that way. Oh, that next change we made makes more money, so we'll do it this way. There's a lot, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's really what this picture is saying, that somehow, again, we can poke humans enough, with enough data analysis, we can figure out how to drive them to learning, right? How to drive them to buy. And so that's what worries me about analytics. And analytics is very institutional, not teacher-centered, right? I've never seen an analytics talk that talks about the kind of questions that I want to ask as a teacher, although I love analytics. And if it's something I get to use, it's one thing. If it's something the institution is using, it's a very different thing. So as we sort of move forward into this brave new world of MOOCs, I want to emphasize that the key thing that makes teaching work, and it goes all the way back to 1957, is a human being. That human being is a teacher. And we got to find ways to make this technology enhance the connection, that human-to-human connection that goes between teacher and student. The notion that says the student doesn't just interact with content, the student interacts with the content which is created by a teacher, and the teacher is still present. The whole goal is not to eliminate the teacher and disintermediate the teacher. And while the MOOC revolution feels in many ways that it's like just another thing that we've been doing in distance education or educational technology, it's not. It's not, because we have faces, and faces that keep in touch with a student. That when they're done, they understand they've achieved something to make somebody happy, right? They've achieved something because a teacher wanted them. The teacher was coaching them. The teacher was telling them it was a good idea. Don't give up. The students laugh because like every lecture I say, please don't quit. Please don't give up. I know this lecture is going to be hard. I know the last one was hard, but the next two are going to be great. Please don't quit. Please don't quit. Please don't quit. I'm just an old guy that's been recording, begging them not to give up on programming, right? But I think that's also important, right? The notion that there is somebody, even though it's being recorded and played from thousands of miles away, somebody wants you to succeed. It's not just, here's your stuff, we are going to push you until, I'll push your buttons, I will force you to learn. No, no, no. Human here wants you to learn. We can't forget that this is our competition. Really what we're trying to do here is compete with Netflix. Because when you're talking to students that aren't sitting in your classroom, Netflix is their choice. So we have to be very personal. We have to create personalities. We have to do all kinds of things to make sure that the students will pick us instead of Avatar or Jericho or whatever. I don't watch TV, so I don't even know what these things are. I had to get a screenshot of this. But we have got to realize that MOOC teaching is as much entertainment and fights amongst many other things for the students' attention. Here's our other competition. Our other competition is the App Store, right? One of the things that you've got is these little devices that have infinite complexity of apps, lots of fun stuff, very engaging. I think what we probably need to do, this is actually my current research area, is how to build an app store for education. And I have a whole project that's dedicated to nothing more than getting to 100,000 learning apps in a learning app store so that every teacher can have their own app, or a teacher can have an app that they share with 10 others, some kind of app that makes your class something other than you talking and giving a quiz. There should be you talking, giving a quiz, and then there should be some kind of problem-solving, puzzle, interesting thing that literally you probably have to build. We all have to build, and we have to share them and reuse them. So I'm going to close talking just a little bit about how this affects brick and mortar education. And so we've been talking a lot about this at the University of Michigan. We are a very residential institution. We hardly even have online programs. We do much more in MOOCs than online programs. We have a beautiful building. We have beautiful rooms. We have a beautiful football stadium for students to come and learn to love our brand and then send us money after they graduate. And so this is just a bit of a schematic about how we interact with our students in a residential education. You have them high school. The green is the part that I don't control, we don't control. They get admitted to the University of Michigan. We actually don't control the first 2 years. They're part of our liberal arts school. And then we admit them as juniors in years 3 and 4, and I control those years. And then they go to work. And I don't control that either. And then maybe they'll come and get a master's degree, but usually it's not our students that get a master's degree. Another way in is you go somewhere else for 2 years, and then you admit as a junior, and then you take the rest there. Or you might just go to another college completely, go to work, and then come back and take a master's degree from us. And so there's a couple of different paths that we will interact with students. But there's lots of problems in these paths. First off, the high school to college transition, especially at a university like University of Michigan, is really painful. We take such a small fraction of our students. It's sort of shameful how few we actually take. We take the best, we take the brightest, we take those with lots of money, right? We don't take everybody. Why? Because we only have so much space, so we're going to take the best. So that means a lot of people go somewhere else, maybe a community college, maybe somewhere else. And those who come might not even be as well prepared. Some of them are awesomely well prepared, but others are not. Others really are not. They might have not just taken the right kind of technical classes. So there's this little clunky bit between leaving high school and coming to college. Another thing that's probably even worse is if someone takes 2 years of college at another school and then comes to us as a junior, they're almost never even close to being prepared. We admit very few people. We would love to admit lots of people from other places, but we can't because we have no idea how they're prepared. So this is really problematic. The other places that's problematic is at the beginning of our master's degree because we have no idea what their previous experience is. So we waste a lot of time, we waste a lot of time in the beginning of the master's degree kind of fixing them, kind of retooling them. Well, MOOCs have a lot to play in here. By us producing courses, we can overlap with high school, we can take the kind of skills that we need when they take our next 2 years, and we can get them into high schools. We can even, while they're taking classes they don't belong to us, we can do MOOCs then. We can have MOOCs that make it so that if they take a 2-year degree somewhere else, they can see the kinds of stuff that they need to understand to succeed 3- and 4-year. If we can make this work, we can make a ton of money and influence a ton of lives in a very positive way. And the same thing I think is true in terms of master's degrees, where instead of this 1 year that we kind of prepare people for a second year of the master's degree, we overlap with their work, and we actually have a couple of MOOCs, and then we have a MOOC-style master's at the end, where then we don't even have to leave work, right? We can take the stuff that we love, the stuff that we're very good at, and we can get that to people without ever losing their jobs. And that's how MOOCs can change how we see a residential education. It's not a replacement for residential education. It's a greatly improving of a residential education. And so I'll close by saying that I am kind of a warrior. I'm a badass. I am a teacher, and I don't apologize for that. I am here. I'm going to do things, build software that makes teachers better, and I am opposed to anything that sort of disintermediates me from my students. See, there's the tattoo. I got another tattoo over here. And I'll just close by saying, I just want us to not forget about the open part. Open content, open free, give. And in the giving is the greatest gift of all. Thank you. Questions? I have this effect on my students too.
So we are so happy that you come to our conference. So thank you again. Clap.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to question that now the MOOC is happening, but what is in your head the next big thing after MOOCs? Because you are not so old.
I could go for a long time on the question of what's next. I really think that the question of what's next is teacher as increasingly owner of their creations. And so right now, students have to go to Coursera, or they have to go to the University of Michigan. I want to create a website called pythonlearn.com that belongs to me completely. You can come to that website, you can take a class, you can get a badge from me. You'll be able to go to Coursera and get that, you'll be able to go to the University of Michigan and get that, but I will have, actually by the end of summer, at least 2 complete topical websites that themselves are learning management systems, that a high school teacher could even teach a class on my website, right? And so, partly because I know a lot about learning management systems and I've decoupled them and I've built all these things, I'm going to recouple them all together, except that this locus is not going to be a single learning management system like a Moodle or a Sakai or a Blackboard, but instead it's going to be a learning management system that's built around a corpus of content and a topic. And so that way, imagine that Coursera is a publisher, edX is a publisher, University of Michigan is a publisher, CreateSpace is a publisher, there could be a new Amazon MOOC platform that becomes a publisher, and I want to create sort of the corpus that is my knowledge, that you don't have to go to any of them if you don't want to, you can come to me. And part of the reason for that is that Coursera is becoming increasingly successful at making money, but they make money by changing the paywall. They do A/B testing and then they change the paywall, but it turns out the paywall only gets better or worse or whatever you want to say, more. And so for me, I want to make sure as my commitment to open that I have a way to give my material away for free no matter who the publisher wants to. So I'll say, Coursera, you figured out how to make money and that's great. You share that with the university, you even share it with me, and I love that and that's great. Go do your thing. But I'm not going to let your policies affect how I share my content. So I have to own that. And the interesting thing is if you look at the cost of bandwidth and the cost of all kinds of things and the fiber optic that we're talking about here today, my ability as a teacher to spend a couple $100 a year and have Coursera-like capabilities that are fully under my control, it's not that hard. 5 years ago it was hard, 10 years ago it was impossible, on and on and on. But today, it's not that hard. Now, I happen to have a PhD in computer science and 20 years of programming expertise and whatever, My whole goal is to make that so someone could look at that as a pattern and do the same thing. And that's wrapped up, if you want to read more about it, under the concept of NGDLE, the Next Generation Digital Learning Environment. And a lot of people are talking about it, but there's a few of us that are like building it. Building that thing that could I hate to use the word disrupt because everyone uses it, but sort of take learning management systems and sort of explode them and reconstruct them in a whole new way. Thank you for your question.
Being one who has taken your internet history course,
I have a sticker for you.
a problem about the coming from secondary school to university. Of course, all Estonian universities have the same problem. Have you thought about helping with MOOCs, really the secondary education, so that this problem will be a bit smaller?
Yes.
And my second question is, how are you making money with Coursera? Because I have taken it free.
Okay. So your first question, I'm very passionate about the high school to college transition. And this is where I think the MOOC movement loses open educational resources. So part of my goal in the next 5 years is to get myself and other teachers like me at places like Michigan that can afford to do it, to build completely free remixable classes so that you can translate those into Estonian if you want, so that you can re-record the lectures with an Estonian faculty member, someone from an Estonian university that can then touch the high school students in the right way. So having me touch your high school students, I think is wrong, right? There is no one right course, not for the things high school students need. There is not one perfect course. Somebody who does Nobel Prize in physics, they're probably the worst teacher to teach physics, right? The person who's the best teacher to teach physics is probably in this town right now, okay? At least for high school students. And so by me building and giving you a model of stuff that I've taught to you once and then you teach locally, you become the expert teacher, and that has to be, I don't want to be the one that disintermediates you from your students. So that's the first question, is free, remix, re-record in the local language, translate, own, write a book, take my book, translate it to Estonian, translate the lectures to Estonian, all that, and locally rebuild it. I haven't answered your money question yet, but you have a follow-up.
No. Or I can use my voice.
It's working.
Yeah. No, I didn't ask you to build courses for our students. We can build them.
Good.
But
That's what should be.
about your students in your high schools, are you just now building courses for the... Because I took your scheme and there was nothing about it.
Well, the Python class is more appropriate for that, right? The internet history is more of a grown-up class. But the Python class is absolutely suitable for high school. And if I teach a web design class that's suitable for high school, there's a whole bunch of things that are totally suitable for high school. But the internet history is not the right example. The money is beautiful, and it's the way all people who do open everything make money, and that is you give it away free, and you make money off those who are willing to pay for services or some kind of value add. And so Coursera charges some people for certificates, and those people that choose to get certificates pay, and everyone else does not have to pay. And for an open guy like myself, open does not mean free or impoverished, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be like a monk and just sit on the side of the road waiting for someone to give you money. Open can be very wealth generating, but you have to, for my values to work, I have to give it away as well as charge for it and make that voluntary. The moment you charge, it must be voluntary. I can't be coercing you into charging. And that's where, to some degree, Coursera and I are somewhat diverging, and that is why I need my own way of giving it away free, even if Coursera thinks they can make more money charging. I think that's fine for them. It's not necessarily fine for my values, so I have to also give it away for free. And the point is that the numbers are so big that even like 1 in 1,000 people pays $80, that adds up really quickly to a lot of money. I think we're probably out of time, unless we have one more burning question. I don't want to take any more time. Okay, here comes I hope that these are the right herbs to take through customs. Thank you.